Hey everyone, it's Vanessa Callahan, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Calm, Empowered Parent podcast. Together, let's challenge the idea that parenting has to be perfect. We know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to raising children, and while love is the key, it sure helps to have the right tools for the job. Raising resilient humans is intensely personal and even transformative work, and I'm here for it. Let's laugh, cry, heal, and learn together. Here we go. Well, I want to welcome you to a very special episode of the Calm Empowered Parent podcast. It occurred to me that a lot of spaces that we call parenting spaces are largely occupied by mothers or those who identify as women. And oftentimes we don't get to hear the perspective of, other caregivers, including fathers. And so as I've been working with my esteemed clients, of whom I have 6 with me today for this panel, we started having conversations about fatherhood and about what it means to step into that space and really investigate what it could mean to be, the best possible dad you can be for your specific kids in a way that feels authentic to you. And also what it means to accept mentorship in your life around fatherhood, around parenting, which I will tell you that not all families have 2 willing parents who want to be a part of mentorship. And so these guys are standouts. They're people that have big hearts that I'm so proud of their progress as people, as fathers, as members of their community, the way they contribute to each other. And it's a real treat to have them here today. And I can't wait to hear what they have to say about all kinds of topics that we have for you. So put your headphones on, take that walk, and sit back and listen to a really interesting conversation. And let's see what can illuminate as we dive in. So we're going to start today by just, having folks give a chance to introduce themselves and let us know, what compelled you to seek support with your parenting, and really help us get a sense of what was going on for you in your household and your family that kind of brought you to this query of I wonder if there's more. I wonder if there's more that we could understand. I wonder if there are resources beyond maybe the books and other things that you had been checking out that could support you in your parenting. We'd love to understand, what it was that used to be tough and maybe is now easier that you're on the other side of working with a mentor. And we'll start off with Art. Hey, Art.
Hi there. So my name is Art. I live in Berkeley, California, with my wife and 2 very strong-willed kids, 4 and 2. It's a very interesting, having the first baby born in COVID, during COVID, and then with the second one come in and their personalities. It's always, for me, when I tell people, it's very interesting that they're people and they're very little people with not a lot of self-control and ability to really manage themselves. And so what compelled me to start looking for something was really around, my daughter has always had a lot of strong emotions and a lot of strong feelings about things. And actually, I come from a family of people with very strong context. I know, I knew that, for example, I was late in my 20s when I really started figuring out how to deal with that. And so when I saw my daughter like that, I wanted to figure out how to help her be stronger, more resilient, be able to deal with those emotions. And so luckily there was an event at my kids' preschool. I dropped in, I listened to it. It sounded all very interesting. And what was fantastic about it is that me and my wife have different parenting styles. And so, and we deal with kids, our parenting styles are often based on how you grew up and how your parents dealt with you. And so coming from that, we were trying. And so, but it was really nice to be able to have a mentor and be able to really get help and understanding of really how to do things. You're doing things and you're dealing with it, but sometimes having the setup or the schema or the way you deal with things really thought out helps create alignment, which is one of the things I realized as we were dealing with the kids, that they were not as aligned. And so as we were not as aligned.
All right, thank you for sharing that, because, I remember that workshop too. And I remember the community's response and that it was a full room. And so folks are really curious about these kinds of changes that are possible, and that alignment can be everything when it comes to creating that consistent environment for the kids. So I applaud you for stepping in to this space of mentorship. David, we'd love to hear from you. What was it for you that brought you in? And I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I'm David. I also live in Berkeley, California, and I have three kids, ages 9, 6, and almost 2. And so pre-mentorship, I had put my career aside to be a full-time parent, and I felt that my daughter was not thriving, sort of emotionally and in terms of yeah, various. So physical health was fine, but I felt like emotionally, in terms of interacting with the world and all the opportunities for her, I felt she wasn't thriving. And so I was at a really, really dark kind of rock bottom place where I felt like all I'm doing is trying to raise my kids and they're not doing well. So I'm just a complete failure. And so I think that was starting to add on to troubles parenting, that I had a low opinion of how I was doing. And not only that, like prior to that, I was a teacher. I was a kid person. I thought I was going to be great at parenting. I really it's embarrassing because I thought I was going to knock it out of the park. And then I felt like I was, the worst that there was. And a specific problem in the parenting also was that we were spending so much time in conflict. And I think my daughter was kind of naturally oppositional, like the style where you'll be like, here, would you like a piece of cake? And they'll be like, no, never. You're so mean. It's like whatever you're trying to give or offer. So we were spending so much time against each other instead of together with each other with shared goals or things like that. And that was just disastrous. And joining the Raising Our Resiliency program with Vanessa really turned that all around for me. And I don't want to get too far ahead, but maybe just like a preview of what's better now than then is that I think now very often we're together. We still have like our moments of opposition, but it's more like 10 or 20% patches of opposition instead of 10 or 20% patches of being aligned and working together. So that's the dramatic change for me. Thanks.
And what a switch. I mean, just to flip that ratio entirely. And I've seen your whole family enter thriving from there over these past years. And it's been so wonderful to witness. We all still have things we're working on, of course. I don't think there's ever such a thing as parenting is done because our kids keep changing, the challenges keep moving, new life events happen. But I watched you welcome a baby into your family over these past years. And yeah, having the capacity to do that. And that's such a beautiful thing. Thank you. I want to hear from Eric next. Eric, yeah, introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear, what was going on for you and your family.
Sure. I'm Eric, or I'm living in San Francisco, and me and my wife have two kids, one 3-year-old and one 5-year-old. And I started with Vanessa probably like 2 years ago now, I think. And so my older son was about 3. And for us, older son was about 3, and we had a pretty fresh little baby at the time. And so my wife was spending so much time with the baby, nursing and doing all of that. And so I got a chance to spend a lot of time with my older son. But for me, the biggest reason for coming to Vanessa was a huge pain point was like tantrums. My son was right in the thick of like his big emotions, and he's like super empathic, has big emotions, and he would have these epic tantrums, and I just did not know how to deal with it. And I was the primary one dealing with it because my wife was with my baby. And so we had tantrums that would go on for the longest one was like 2.5 hours was a tantrum, which I still have like PTSD from. And I still, even now, I'm working on it. But when like any kind of thing starts, whether it's a tantrum or something, like I have to like center myself and breathe. So I was in like I was like a wreck, basically an emotional wreck, when it comes to that stuff. And so that's what led us to Vanessa, and she's helped a lot with learning what's going on behind behind the emotions in my son and how to approach it. I'll leave it there, and I can tell you more a little bit later.
Save some good stuff for later. Eric, I just want to commend you for, kind of waving the white flag when you needed to. And David as well, right? Just being like, okay, some I need help, mercy, help me understand what to do here. And that's a really painful thing to be around your child's dysregulated nervous system, clearly suffering, and you're not being able to do anything about it for 2.5 hours plus. Like that's so rough on you. And I just admire the way you picked yourself up and said, I need something needs to change, and I'm going to figure this out, and it's okay to ask for help. And you've stepped into the strategies with such an open mind, and it's been really cool to see the results that you've had and how much more enjoyment you're able to have because of the results.
Me too.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And let's see, let's go to Gary next. I'd love to hear from Gary. Introduce yourself and yeah, what brought you into mentorship? Love to hear that.
Sure. My name is Gary. I live in El Cerrito, California, and I have three boys, aged 9, 7, and 4. And what brought me and my wife to the program really, I found myself kind of not being the parent that I was idealizing and wanting to be, and sort of resorting more to the parenting styles that I grew up with, which was very, kind of authoritative and built, a lot on kind of shame and guilt and yelling, and I found myself just kind of resorting more and more to those tools and realizing that it's not working, and I was just really struggling to get, kind of any cooperation and just not enjoying myself as a person, as a parent, and not living up to the standard that I'd set for myself. So, at that point, I thought, there has to be a different way to do this. It shouldn't be this hard. But Vanessa gave a presentation at my kid's school, and we attended, and the brief presentation that it was, just really clicked and struck a nerve with how I personally, and my wife as well, how we would like to parent, and just embodied the kind of thoughts and ideas that we would want to instill in our kids to build in that resilience, build in that trust and ability to emotionally regulate. And so that's something that we've been working on since, and now it's the change has been tremendous, both in our kids as well as just in us.
And every time you report back, I'm like thrilled to hear how, like just like with David, with 3 kids, you're able to see progress and how the siblings sort of, bounce off each other, and for better or worse, but trending towards better. And that's a pretty exciting thing when you have like family cohesion with multiples. And yeah, can't wait to hear more about how you got there later in the episode. Thank you, Gary. I would love to pass it on to Paul. Paul, share a little bit about, your family and like what was kind of going on before you and your wife signed up for coaching.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm Paul. I live in Berkeley with my wife, Terry, and we have a son. His name is Jamie. He's 5 now. He's turning 6 soon. He is an incredible deep thinker with a lot of attention to detail, which at his age blends into everything. Big emotions, big emotions, big emotions. They say kids don't come with a manual, right? Well, that's true. And myself, I was raised very calmly, very level-headed. I just figured that's how the world works best, and I get frustrated when I see other people suffering and angry, and I'm like, guys, what, just chill. That doesn't work, right? So, okay, kids don't come with a manual. This guy's going nuts. Mom's losing it. She's tired. Nobody has the resources available anymore. We're just out of bandwidth. I'm like, this isn't working. I haven't slept either. I need a manual. I need a manual. These guys need some, and I was almost like kind of nasty about it. These guys need some bleeping resilience. How do I, ugh. And then we go to a workshop at my kid's preschool. And I just thought it was part of the preschool. And there's Vanessa saying resilience. I'm like, yeah. Okay, so can I find that manual? I want to open up the manual, and I want to, look at the glossary and go to the part where it says how to help everybody get along. everyone's yelling at each other too much, and it's stressing me out. And so it was really quite something to discover Vanessa. And then once I started to understand, oh, wait, this is actually a mentorship program. Oh, okay. And I've heard other fathers be like, no, we don't need help. I can figure this out on myself. I've always been the type of person to read the manual. I like to read the manual. I like to understand the problems I'm having, why they're happening, what I could try to do about it myself. But the manual is really my guide. And Vanessa has been our manual since we have worked with Vanessa. It has really done wonders for mom also to be learning the language of resilience for her son and have her put that into her own growth. And so now we have a much calmer household and everybody's very happy and more struggles to come, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, Paul, thank you so much. And I just have seen how much you and your and mom, right? And your partner, how you've come closer and closer and closer together through this as well. And I love that your story about like, because I don't know that you shared with me exactly what was going through your mind when you came to the workshop, but that the word resilience stands out makes so much sense to so many people because it is what we're looking for often, resilience, relationships, cohesion, all these different themes that we're pulling forward. And I just applaud you for stepping in, even when other fathers, like you mentioned, were like, oh no, I don't need anything. You're like, I'm a manual reader. Thank you very much. I need that in my life. And it seems like we found it. So good on you for recognizing it when the resources come that match what we need. It's so important that we sort of embrace their arrival. And I think you and your partner did a great job of that. So yeah, hats off. I'd love to hear from Tony next. Tony.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tony. I live in San Francisco with my wife and our son, Cass, who's 5. So rambunctious little dude. What compelled us? We were very much like, so number one, we had tried for about 10 years to have a child, and we were kind of resigned to that we weren't going to be able to have a kid. And then so it was like a really pleasant surprise when Cass came along. But very quickly we realized like, well, we don't know what we're doing. Like we haven't like planned for this thing, right? And so like we always kind of made a joke every so often, like we don't know what we're doing, so we hire experts, right? Like we have experts because we don't know. And I think our story is a little bit different from the rest of y'all. Like our son's neurodivergent, so we have some unique challenges with raising him that we have to kind of adjust some of the strategies to fit his kind of neurodivergence a little bit. And like I came from a, for lack of a better way of saying it, a very violent upbringing. So one of the things for me was I wanted to create being a father versus kind of just being the inherited father, so to speak, right? Like whatever conversations I inherited from my father or my upbringing, I didn't want to bring that forward, right? Like I wanted to be like, okay, what kind of dad do I want to be, and what tools do I need to make that happen? One of the unique issues that we dealt with was like a sleep routine, right? Which I'll share about later. But we had a call with Vanessa. It was a quick, whatever, 30-minute call. And in that 30 minutes, we were able to like completely radically transform an area of raising Cass that was it was like a 2.5 hour process. And it's holds now, it's been 2 years now. That's now a 10 to 15 minute process. And it's just been like with one phone call. Like it was like, and I'll share about that in a little bit later. But yeah, so mainly for us, it was like both creating who we are as parents and like we want expert help. We have someone who's been there and done that like, can really help with that sort of thing. So
Yeah, and it's amazing how much the community brings forward the strategies and tools and ways that they're going to be used, right? So one thing that I applaud you, Tony and Saban, from the start is being like, our kid's different. And he operates in this very different way. And we're here to understand not only these tools, but how to, make them work for our kid. And your advocacy for him and your honesty and your forthrightness and your sharing in the community has just been so powerful for everybody. So we feel like we've been on this journey with you, Tony. And oh, by the way, Tony also and Saban share, a more kind of detailed version of their story in season 1, episode 10. If anybody wants to check that out, you can check that out on all of your platforms. So coming back to this group, one other question I have for dads, and for the folks right here is, what is like a standout thing that you've learned through your parenting work? And it can be a tool or strategy that you've learned through coaching, right? And like why, and you can let us know why that's your favorite. But it can also just be about like just generally being a dad, And so we'd love to hear from each of you. And we'll have you, Tony, we'll have you kick us off this time. Can't wait to hear what you all have to say.
So one of the things about our household is that like while I'm the dad, I don't know that I'd necessarily take on the dad role. Like it's kind of interesting because Yvonne and I are a little bit flipped in how we operate when it comes to raising Cass, but I get to be the silly one. That's one thing that I get to do that I just really enjoy. I get to be silly with Cass. We make up games constantly that are like unique to him and I. That Saban's like, what are you guys doing? He's like, playing a game. Just chill. We're playing a game. Um, I will just make a small anecdotal thing. Saban and I play a game where we ask each other, "Why do you love me?" Just like, and we make up answers, right? And I think for the first time the other day, she asked me, and I said, "Because you made me a dad," right? Like I'd never said that to her before, but I like find that being a father is like an expression for me that I didn't know that I wanted, right? Because I didn't want kids before I met my wife. I didn't want kids. I was like, I don't know, I'm not interested in that. So having a kid, like once I became a dad, like it's very much a natural expression for me, which I just absolutely love being a father. I think the biggest tool that we kind of take away that we use more than anything else is the scaffolding tool, right? We typically we do this game where we do red, yellow, green. Like what's red behavior, what's yellow behavior, what's green behavior, right? And our son loves to play in the yellow and red very very much. One of the big ones is walking, right? Because he had a bit of a elopement issue where he basically saw cars because he loved cars, and so he had to run into the street to see them. And so we walking was incredibly stressful, like incredibly stressful. I've had like in the city there are kind of some thoroughways that he on more than one occasion bolted and crossed a thoroughway just like that, so that kind of thing. And using the red, yellow, green kind of tool, I was able to create with him what is acceptable and not acceptable when we're walking. And it's taken about a year and a half. It took about a year and a half of working with that tool where I'm confident walking with him. Like now he'll stop me and he's like, Papa, stop. Are there any cars coming? Like, no, I think we're good. He goes, okay, like, and that, which is, it's just funny to watch him take this on, right? But it was inside of like, okay, green behavior is stopping behind the yellow marker here and looking both directions before you cross the street and making sure there's no one coming. That's green behavior. And like yellow was not stopping behind the yellow marker, and then red was just running across the street, right? Like those were the kind of what we set up for that sort of thing. And lots and lots of conversations with him, like lots of walking. Like I had to like there were times where like I just had to put my hand on his chest just to slow him down, to stop him. And now I'm at the point where I trust him when we're on the street. I completely trust him to walk, and it makes life a lot easier in that regard.
It's so powerful that you switched from molding behavior as like right and wrong, which I think is similar, akin to what you shared you grew up with, right? It's like if you're out of line, then boom. And instead, when you saw the behavior out of bounds, you're like, how can I scaffold, which is like breaking it down into smaller steps and get really clear, the red, yellow, green zones, and then walk him through a learning process so that he could understand how to achieve those sort of green behaviors you were just describing. And being willing to take on that role of like the guide and like the person who's going to, be there and present to support his learning is everything. And why you've had so much success, Tony. So I see how you stepped into fatherhood in this way that's like really empowered with tools, but also this like spirit of support, as well as being willing to create structure. So really powerful stuff. Yeah, awesome. I can see why that one stands out to you. Had such success with it. Thank you for that. And then let's kick it to Paul. Paul, how about for you? Like What has kind of stood out, the most important thing you've learned through the parenting work, maybe a tool or strategy that stands out to you?
I think since becoming a father, I've really learned to simultaneously lower my expectations and raise my patience. Um, and I'm not the type that just loses it or anything, but what I mean here is understanding that emotions can be different for different people. And really watching my son grow through that has taught me a pretty valuable lesson that, what does his world really look like and what does it feel like? I've always been the sort that's always interested in perspectives and, for the sake of arguing with people, I like to kind of know their view on things so I can understand it better. But I had no idea that it would be quite this like mind-blowing having a child. It's incredible. And I think what really hand in hand, what the one thing that I really take away from this coaching so far is just the valuable lesson of, I always say back to the scenario, I'm trying to get him to come to the dinner table and he's playing with something. I'm yelling at him, hey, dinner's ready, dinner's ready. Here's the tool of just getting up and going over there and getting into his world and like getting down on my knees and actually like getting behind him like I'm a camera and I'm his vision and I'm making this movie out of his world and seeing what he's doing and really thinking about what he's feeling. And then I can say something relatable. And actually I enter his world, and it gives me shivers just talking about it now. I enter his world and then I can communicate with him in that world. And it's just so rewarding. Like it changes everything for me. And that also helps me to be more patient and lower my expectation. Like, wow, this is his world. I got to get in there. And I may have come across it on my own or not, but I really feel like Vanessa threw me in that direction quick. It really helps. What it was about, how do you get the kid to come to the dinner table? And it ended up being about life. So yeah, that definitely stands out for me.
It's wild, the invitation of having children in your life, like what they invite you into, like getting to see things through fresh eyes, and also their eyes, though, their specific, unique eyes. And a lot of times people come into this coaching work too because they're like, I am nothing like my kid. Like, I don't relate. I'm not the kind of person who would XYZ. And then you get to like experience something completely new about life through this human that, you're with and has entrusted you with their well-being because they're in your care. And I remember feeling switching from feeling overwhelmed to feeling like honored to be a care provider even as a teacher. So I was like, I get to see through the lenses of like 24 different children, any given day, as well as my stepchildren at home, and how that's like kind of wildly informative of like all the possibilities of life, right? So very excited that that was something that you came into right away, Paul, and as you've been able to, go forward with for several years now, and where that's probably taken you on a lot of adventures through Jamie's eyes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Let's kick it to Gary next. I'd love to hear from you. What stood out? And
Yeah, I think this was, one of the first things I remember you saying, when you gave that workshop, was that, there's no single right way to parent. And that was something that certainly, struck a chord with me. And, I think with my personal personality and kind of the way I see things, there's a tendency that like, if I fall short on something, I just kind of really take it hard and kind of just get down on myself and just kind of have this downward spiral. And from that, I've tried to remind myself more recently since entering this program now is we preach the growth mindset to our kids all the time, but sometimes we don't remember to apply that to ourselves as well. And that like we are not, a fixed thing as a parent. We are able to grow and expand our ability to improve our skills, have new strategies, have different abilities to cope emotionally. And sometimes we just need to remember that that applies to us too. We it's not just the things that we try to instill in our kids, and it's something that I would say is not necessarily the most frequent thing that I use, but certainly something that it was very new to me is just the emotion coaching aspect, and that like my version of emotion coaching, before was bottle it up inside and kind of shove it deep down and never let it out. Um, you know, Clearly that doesn't work so well. So having that new skill set, that's something that I'm still learning and trying to, embody regularly, so that to the point where it is something that I can use without having to think about, and that it will eventually hopefully become second nature. And then hopefully I can get that to also, have my kids see that and see that role modeling and eventually use those same skills. So.
And when you mentioned growth mindset, I'm so glad you did. For those who are listening or aren't familiar, it comes from Carol Dweck's work out of Stanford. And she wrote the book Mindset. And she talks about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And you pretty much, just explained what it was there, Gary. But for those who are listening who are curious, it's like this idea that these things that we sometimes perceive as fixed about ourselves, about others, even about situations, actually there's space for growth and for change, especially not only by putting the effort, but also finding the right tools and strategies to apply effort with. And I've seen everyone on this panel approach their parenting with that level of like curiosity. But I hear you, Gary, that sometimes we hit these roadblocks where we say, I'm just not that kind of person internally. Like it's almost an automatic response. This is hard because I lack something, or because I don't have this innate ability, right? And I do hear dad say this, and it's always kind of heartbreaking when I hear it. And no one in this room has said it, at least to me directly, but they said, I can't do that because I'm not blank like their mother. And I always wonder about like limiting how much we can like limit ourselves into boxes of identity, whether that's because of our gender or something else, right? And I love how you're speaking to this idea that we can, go beyond like what we associate with what's fixed about a certain identity or certain demographic, and really look at like what's on the real menu, like that wide, bigger menu of possibility. And when you model that to children too, it keeps their world open. Like they're more like maybe they're struggling in one subject over another, and they start to make up a story about I'm not a math person, or I'm not good at with letters, or I'm not creative. And they box themselves in and they limit their possibilities. But here we are expanding those for our kids with growth mindset, and catching it in yourself when it comes up, that fixed mindset, and doing something about it is so powerful. And so I love that you brought that into the conversation, Gary. Thank you, especially around fatherhood, because I think a lot of men are taught societally to become a certain kind of person and stay within those limits. Like maybe anger is okay, but sadness and fear is not, for example. Those are the ones you have to bottle up, or whatever story you might have gotten impression of what masculinity is supposed to look like, what fatherhood is supposed to look like. All of us in this room are bending those rules, sometimes even breaking them on purpose. And it's a really exciting thing to witness in each and every one of you. So thanks again for bringing that up, Gary. Such a powerful point. Would love to kick it to Eric next.
Sure, yeah. I'd say like to piggyback on what Gary said, I think for me, one of the things that I've learned most is this is as much of a journey for me in understanding my personal emotions as it is understanding my kids' emotions and how kids work in general. Because like along with getting like framework, because I'm not a child development expert, right? So along with Vanessa having these frameworks of understanding where your kid is and what's normal at that age and how to even approach dealing with them, like I couldn't help, and through this process, I couldn't help but see the mirror in myself, and thinking about how I am approaching all these emotions, these triggers that come up. And like I was talking about before, I was getting, these tantrums that were these epic tantrums. It really like opened me up emotionally, where like deep stuff, deep trigger, dark stuff that I didn't even know was there was coming out, and how I was reacting to these tantrums. I always thought of myself as like an even keeled, emotionally like chill guy. But like it was just opening up all sorts of things. And so I really had to check myself. And I think, one of the biggest takeaways for me is that like I am now way more conscious of when I'm reacting to things, how I'm reacting to things, and then also taking this as like an impetus to do some more personal work to understand what my own triggers are and why, and work on those, so that when these situations come up with my kids, that I don't knee jerk go into like a conflict mode, or whatever it may be, that I can actually be comfortable with the emotions that are happening be at peace with them, and then deal with them, whether I just let them pass or with my kid, deal with them, let them pass, validate them, or whatever I need to do to help the situation. So that I would say that's for me, that's the biggest, most impactful, huge thing that I didn't expect would happen at all.
You've heard me say it before, everyone in this room, but maybe listeners haven't. I always think of like raising children in whatever capacity you are, but especially as their primary parent, is like an accelerated course in personal growth that's made just for you. It's like custom. Because, if you're out in the world and people trigger you, oftentimes we can like move away from them, or we can distance ourselves, or we can like, even if it comes down to it, find a new job or something else. But these kids, we're stuck with these kids. And they have limited life experience about like when and where and how to say things to you. So they're going to find those buttons and push them. It's almost like hardwired into, kids to do that. And so I'm always like, oh, you think you're done with personal growth? Have some children or spend a lot of time with children and see what comes up. So thank you for eliminating that for us, Eric, and that's been such a big part of what you've experienced. And I would love to kick it to David next and hear from him.
Yeah. So we're really stuck with them, Vanessa, because every now and then when I'm doing really badly, I wonder if maybe there wouldn't just be a better parent out there for one of my kids than me.
Well, let me respond to that and say that I have had thousands of moments in the classroom internally where I'm like, can I just kick this kid out the window and never see them again? Like internally, like it's a conversation I have to have with myself. And then I remind myself of my priorities of like, no, actually, and then I check in with myself. Like, what does Vanessa need right now if she's going there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish sometimes, David, that we could do that, sub in. But yeah, we have villages for a reason, right? Learning this in a community is part of how we create resilience in those moments. We could say, I thought this. Everyone was laughing in the room, by the way, when I said that, because we all know what that feels like. And yet we find a way to get back in the game with each other and with new inspiration. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Well, just like you guys were saying, about, it forces you to work on yourself or think about, or it's like a mirror and you're seeing your own stuff and what you might need to work on. I think, I also had this thought, like, I'm chill, I'm relaxed, I can let things go. But then somehow if the other person isn't being chill or relaxed, you find you're not that chill about other people not being chill. And you're like, uh-oh, we got to work on that. Because you're sitting there thinking like, why can't you just be relaxed? Oh, wait, am I not relaxed anymore? I thought I was so relaxed. And I think the biggest lesson that I've got maybe, and I don't know if this was taught directly, Vanessa, or if this is me combining things I picked out in different parts of your teachings, but I think the biggest thing I've figured out is that very often you can back out of almost any conflict, because a conflict is really something that two people are choosing to be in. So you're thinking like, my kid's refusing to come to the table, and that's causing the conflict. But the conflict, half of it is also that you're insisting the kid come to the table for dinner, right? Which maybe you have a choice about. And you might have your reasons why you think the kid should come to the table. Maybe you said they should come to the table and you think it's important that when you say something, they know you mean it and you back it up. Or maybe you have a kid who needs their rest and you've got a schedule and you know that bedtime's going to take this amount of time and they want a story and that's your precious time. And dinner's got to start by this time, or tomorrow your kid's going to suffer and they're going to be cranky at school and tired all day, right? So you have all your reasons and you're so adult, you think your reasons are well thought out and like really important. But a lot of the times you could choose, you have options and you can back out of some of the stuff that you're thinking that you have to do. So a lot of the times that we're having a conflict with our kids, and there's probably many, many reasons, but I think a lot of the times it's because you're trying to make a kid follow some kind of like adult logic about scheduling and, we need a healthy diet and we need this much exercise or we need education or like what, and we've got this whole planning and we've sort of seen this big picture, and a kid's world is very different than that kind of regimented Google Calendar that I've got going on now and probably many of the other dads. So just realizing sometimes you can let go of certain things and just, okay, we'll be late, or okay, we won't do that one thing, etc. And then suddenly you're out of the conflict. And relatedly, just the idea that you can take a pause, like before you deal with something, I think is the other biggest lesson for me, because often in that pause, is where I'll realize that I have options other than the conflict, right? So you say something, the kid says something else, and you're like, oh, do we go into this conflict? Or like what are actually all my options here instead of assuming I have to drive the situation through in a certain way. So the pause gives you a chance to see that you have choices and often to let go of some things.
It reminds me too what Eric was saying about like catching that moment where instead of like a knee-jerk reaction and like, you know, you actually, and I think the word in that follows pause is like choose, right? Or like choose a response rather than like, or like even observe, pause, observe, choose. And think of how many ways that's useful in life. Like if you pause when you're in that mode of make it happen or something, and then you observe what's going on, and then you choose. Some people like, you know, who are like Buddha in the Buddhist tradition, and there's a meditation I was just listening to, I think it was Tara Brach. She was talking about the observer, like kind of shifting into like the observer position of being able to like see and watch things unfold. And then you can even observe that where am I coming from right now with my adult agenda, trying to impose it on the children, right? And what actually needs to happen here, and like what else do I observe? What other information can I pull in this pause? And what could I choose? Maybe you still choose the same thing, but with a different tone, or maybe you choose differently. Like decide, like I think several of you said, like kind of have more patience, let it go, let it pass, right? Let it move through. Um, or sometimes get more clear, like kind of what Tony was saying. There's a lot of options once you create that space for choosing. So sounds like a powerful life skill to me. Love that that's coming through the parenting work. It is one of my secret like missions is for us all to have just more like self-awareness, self-management, self-mastery through this experience. So I'm excited that it's happening for many of you as we move through this. We're going to kick it to Art. Would love to hear if you have anything to add about this, you know, for you, like what do you feel like has been the most important thing you've learned? And yeah, any tools that stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most interesting thing, and Vanessa, you mentioned this, that you work with a lot of folks that, you know, there's a kid that they're like, I don't relate to anything to them, like in terms of who they are. On the flip side, I have a daughter who looks very much like me, the temperament and all that I understand, but then she reacts in a completely different way than I do. And it's like genetics are there, but the environment is different and the parents are different. And so it's very like intriguing to be able to see that and then see my own reactions like everyone else to that. Like I'm like, but you shouldn't be reacting this way. And so like one of the very, you know, and one of the very interesting things is I discovered as part of this work is take a break, look at it and see what you know, what is my response, because part of it is her responding and amplifying what I am saying. But on the flip side, it's also about the fact of really having a curiosity about her, about, you know, knowing that you think you know a person, right? Like, and so like this little person who has all of these like emotions and just in a neutral, non-judgmental tone, just try to get into their world and try to understand where they're coming from. Sometimes it's not thought out. Sometimes it's just emotions, feelings all coming out, but getting in there and really have that sense of curiosity really helps me understand about them and then help me understand about my feelings as I'm kind of like reacting to it as well. And similarly, I think for my wife as well, she has, you know, they're actually very different, my daughter and her, but you know, the same, like, you know, you get a little bit of both of the parents. And I think she had the same thing where she saw her reactions and was able to like change it. And so that actually was the us realizing our reactions were different, were coming from a pre-programming was what helped us get aligned to really on how we respond back to her, which then helped her feel, you know, that like having that feeling of like the sameness of responses really helped her then be able to calm herself often and then be able to really respond to us, which then opened her to us talking about her brain, about her ability to like what it is for her to have that emotions, and then her being able to talk about it, and us being able to really build on all of these tools that we're learning to be able to respond in kind of a non-judgmental calm way back to her, and learning about ourselves as we're learning about her, and kind of creating that little partnership. So yeah, that's been what we have gotten out of the class. It's kind of not one thing, but like having all of these tools available, but at the same time giving her the tools that she could, use. And I talk about her because she's 4. Our other one is just getting into it, and so we're hoping that as we teach the older kid, the younger kid kind of picks up on those things and really starts emulating it as well.
Reminds me of the principle of the first pancake. I don't know if everybody's heard this. Several people were in the program where I had at a workshop. I was there with one of my co-presenters, and this topic came up with these preschool parents. With a lot of them had multiples, and there was maybe the 4 to 6 year old, and then there was a younger one who was watching what the 4 to 6 year old was doing, and a lot of them were like, "Oh yeah, we want to get our first pancake right so that the next one is easier out of out of the batter bowl." And when I said that, there were so many laughs in the room because, it's true. If you invest in that older child and sort of your family system in sort of understanding what are our expectations, what are our norms, what can we, how do we handle emotions, things like that. A lot of times it trickles down to the next, child, because they're kind of coming up in something that's already pretty well established as a partnership. So. And love that just the idea. I mean, this could be novel. Maybe there are people out there who are listening to this and have never heard of parents partnering with their 4-year-olds about how we're going to handle emotions in our family. Like, never have I ever had that experience all the way up into my 40s with my parents. So like, starting that young at 4, and then the 2-year-old getting to witness that, like, what a powerful thing. I love it. And this is a moment where I just want to acknowledge these dads and what the beautiful families they're creating. There's so much to be said about the ways that you've stepped into not only mentorship, but into yourselves and into that self-inquiry that we've been chatting about here. And also, I have to say that, for all parents, for all different reasons, oftentimes there's some heavy lift about kind of going against the grain. And whether that's going against the grain of what you were raised with, or what messages you've been given about what it should look like, what it should feel like, how it should sound to be, specifically in this case, a father, right? And also just like life circumstances, like we have a lot on our plates in modern life. All of you have parented through the pandemic. There's been a ton that you've all had to sort of like hold on to, as like life has thrown a lot at us in the last several years. And so I guess what I'm curious to know next has a lot to do with like how any breakthroughs or wins have like impacted your life. And for those of you who are noticed that this episode is about to wrap up, this is a little teaser for episode part 2. So stay tuned for part 2 of this amazing conversation with these powerful dads. And for those of you watching, I really want you to check out some of these moves. We got together and had a little happy hour and a hangout before the episode, and then went and busted some moves at a local hip hop dance class, which was suggested by David, and we all of us that could make it had a blast. As we wrap up, remember, there's no one-size-fits-all way to parent. Keep nurturing those strong family bonds and watch resilience bloom in your community. You've got this. And if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can also hop over to thecalmempoweredparent.com for current events and to grab your copy of the Calm Parent Strategy Guide. You can even learn how to bring our free and low-cost workshops to your school or community. Your support means the world to us and helps us empower more parents and children. Let's do this together.